because my normal examples of your lobby is reductionist, fear-mongering, scare techniques. And that's not what I heard from you tonight. So, can you get beyond reductionism? Or maybe do you think I'm being unfair?
Well, I suppose I do think you're being unfair. What I was talking about was when human life begins, when a person can be called biologically, scientifically, a member of the human family, a living human being conceived of human parents. And that is a matter for science to determine. It's not a matter for theologians or philosophers or whatever category
Actually, I'm sorry, I think it is.
Person.
Yes. It's a matter of all of those together.
Well, okay. We will have to agree to differ. I mean, in the time of when, if you like, slavery was the law of the land, it was the position of the Supreme Court in the US, it was the position of the courts in Britain, that the slave was not a member of the human family. It was a thing, it was a piece of property. Now, it would take, perhaps in those days, a medical scientist to say, well, hang on a second, this is a member of Homo sapiens, the same as you and me. And I can prove it from a scientific point of view. Gentlemen.
The challenge of science, there's recent neurological studies that suggest that there is no definable sense of free will, that they can determine actions or thoughts that arise before they actually arise, in a sense that we can understand ourselves, we can measure it. If that's the case, then you could argue that any human interaction at all is redundant. You know, there's going to be a point where the science you're using to defend your argument flies in the face of it. Are you willing to alter your position?
All I'm talking about is whether or not somebody is a member of the human family, Homo sapiens, whether we have the genetic makeup to be classified as a human being, whether we are alive, whether we are a living person. You know, if I die, I would want a medical science doctor to determine whether I was actually dead. I wouldn't want a philosopher or somebody else to come along and make that decision. That's all I'm talking about, whether you're human and alive.
It is quite a jump to go from the category of Homo sapiens to talk about members of the human family. So science will always be past its remit if you try to define it only with science. It is the job of theology and philosophy to do so. And thank you very much for sharing your story, but you've very nicely invoked your daughter's subjectivity in the situation of her motherhood. And all we're asking for is, and I will put in a biographical note, as of 8 years ago, I was also in the position of obtaining an abortion. I was deciding upon the personhood of my child, which I do acknowledge. And it is a subjectivity I will always carry in the first-person basis. I will always treat it in terms of my countenance in front of God and my fellows. It is a deeply rooted item in my moral autonomy, and I will disagree forever that you pitch something as important as moral autonomy with moral authority against moral authority of the state. So basically we reason together, but there's something like individual moral autonomy that you cannot take away from specific individuals endowed with subjectivity who happen to be female and who happen to be productively in the role of carrying pregnancies.
Yes. I am not here to talk about any particular abortion. I'm here to talk about how I think our society should be governed. I take the view that moral autonomy has to respect, by definition, everyone's moral autonomy. And everyone includes everyone in the human family. Everyone has the right to develop their capacity to make moral choices. But our moral choices are limited in various ways. That's what governments do. They limit the moral choices that we can make. And I'm saying that the most fundamental issue that anyone has to recognise is the right of other people to have a life so that their moral autonomy can be developed, but with respect for others. Now, in no way am I judging what you have very nicely shared with us, and thank you for that. Sorry.
I was going to say, maybe just two more questions, guys, because we need to be out. But
first of all, I just want to say that I respect you doing this good hierarchy of human life and what emphasis you put on your own child. But I want to ask you first of all, for a mother then who decides not to have an abortion, and may that be a single mother, may that be a young mother, what sort of structures or mechanisms do you think that there should be in place to make that sort of transition easier than the
Well, I can only talk about what our society has done in pragmatic terms in that area. I mean, in the first instance, anyone who comes to us for help, we help them from A to Z, and our policy as an organisation on a purely human level is if that telephone rings and somebody rings and they are pregnant and distressed or whatever the situation might be, we help that person. I say, please treat that person as though it was your spouse, your girlfriend, your daughter, and so on. So we treat everyone as a human being. We fought successfully for an amendment to the Housing Act in Britain in 1975, which provided women with housing as of right when they had a child. And that's something that it's a controversial social policy, but it's something that we did as an organisation. We lobbied for and we achieved that. I have very personal experience of very close personal experience of motherhood of someone who was left on their own with two children. My wife's first marriage was annulled, and I have two stepsons. And she was on her own, right at the bottom rung, if you like. And I can see how unenlightened the policies were in the school, in the local community, to give support. So what I've said is that there should be equal social protection for the mother and the child. Now, clearly, that involves a whole gamut of policies. One would have to look at the particular country and where things stood, but it must start with professional birth attendance for mothers, for proper care during childbirth, in order to ensure that mothers who suffer bleeding at childbirth and so on are properly cared for. And instead of our countries funding the spread of abortion overseas, which does nothing for the mothers and still less the children. So it does depend on the issue, but these are things that we've been involved in, and I certainly have got personal experience on. Sorry, you must choose.
No, go ahead. Hand up for ages.
I'm bringing it back to the conversation just for a second, and it was just full respect. I don't mean any disrespect by it, but that was your daughter's choice, and I fully respect that for her. She should have gotten that opportunity. Nobody should force that as discrimination on her if she feels she wants to continue pregnancy. But for the mother who's struggling and who is already dealing with that loss and doesn't want to carry the baby for another 20 weeks, knowing that this baby's going to die and feeling it move and everything else, do you not see that maybe there should be a choice there for her?
Could I just turn the question round? Because clearly you're thinking one thing, you've been good enough to recognise the witness that Pat has made, and thank you for that. But one of my points was, and I made it in connection with rape that was quite rightly put to me, is that what I object to in these hard cases is the emotional exploitation of the issue. Now, there has been a very concerted attempt by the television companies in this country, the media, to focus on the plight of mothers who have babies who are incompatible with life, which is not an expression I particularly like, to be honest, because, you know, I had a granddaughter who died at 9 months, and no one knows why she died. Maybe she had a life incompatible with life. But this is Orwellian speak to me, and I think it disrespects not only the baby, but it disrespects the mother, like Cleona, Pat's daughter, in talking about their baby in that way. So let's watch our language, and please be very critical of the media and the way it presents these issues. Really, when you see a programme of mothers who say, well, you know, they talk about their very, very moving plight, and they're saying, I shouldn't be denied an abortion, which actually, if it weren't for the fact that this was coming up now on the political agenda, this wouldn't be happening at all. Surely we should be saying that those mothers need every support, every help. So really, what you should be demanding, what we should all be demanding, is that people like Pat's daughter get equal airtime. And let the whole Irish public then judge when they see the moving account of the way their family came together to support her during the pregnancy, the way they came together at the birth of the child, and the respect that a disabled child had. And let me just, and I do feel rather passionately about this. I think one of the worst things we've seen with the development of the abortion culture is the idea that it is right, it is actually right to kill people because they're disabled. Now, I think that is shocking. 95% of people detected with spina bifida, people detected with Down syndrome, are killed on those grounds alone.
I'm not saying that anyone with disability should be. I don't mean that in the way I'm sentence.
But if you have an abortion law and you give people the so-called right, then I can assure you that that suits governments down to the ground. It saves them millions of pounds a year, and it increases the trend towards euthanasia, and we have a whole development of human embryo research where babies are created in test tubes in order to experiment on them and destroy them in order to overcome somebody else's disease later on in life. There is a new sort of hierarchy of human beings where some people get autonomous choices and can do what they like, particularly if they're born into comfortable Western countries, and other people who are unborn and disabled can be just regarded as expendable.
But you're not really answering your question, actually just asking you if you're absolute.
I thought I was pretty absolute in my answer. I'm sorry, I got passionate. Yes, I'm absolute on this. I think if I leave you with anything this evening, think about disabled people, how their right to life is being swept aside by campaigns for abortion. It's fundamental to the pro-abortion argument, and it has become central to the argument of the pro-abortion lobby in Britain and in Ireland. And I think it's a disgrace for Ireland that if you allow yourselves to be hoodwinked by that. It's emotional exploitation of an issue, and it shows total disrespect to the most vulnerable people in society.